It was supposed to be an ordinary morning at the airport, the kind people barely remembered by lunchtime. But everything changed in an instant. Passengers froze mid-step as 21 police dogs suddenly broke formation, charging toward Gate 12 with laser-sharp focus. Before anyone could react, the dogs formed a tight circle around a tiny blonde girl standing alone beside a row of empty seats. No one moved. No one breathed. The dogs began barking wildly sharp, explosive barks that ricocheted through the glass terminal. The little girl stumbled back, eyes wide with fear. "Please, make them stop," she cried, voice trembling as she clutched a worn, stuffed bear against her chest. Officers shouted commands, but the dogs refused to budge. Their gaze locked on the child, as if she carried something dangerous, or something dangerous was closing in on her. A tall officer stepped forward, his voice firm but gentle. "Sweetheart, we just need to ask you a few questions." "I didn't do anything," the girl whispered, panic rising. Around them, people whispered frantically. Was she in danger? Was she carrying something illegal? Or more terrifying, were the dogs trying to protect her from something no one else could sense? What happened next would turn this quiet morning into a story the world would never forget. Before we continue, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me, where are you watching from? I love seeing how far our stories travel. This channel is still very new, and we're trying to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, a small milestone, but a very meaningful one for us. If you'd like to support the channel, so stories like this can keep coming, please consider subscribing. Just one click truly makes a huge difference. Now, let's get back to the story. Morning sunlight spilled through the airport's towering glass walls, filling the terminal with a warm golden glow. The rolling hum of suitcases, the distant chime of boarding calls, and the soft chatter of travelers created a rhythm everyone recognized, a normal, predictable day. Flight attendants offered polite smiles. Families hurried toward check-in counters. No one had the faintest idea that within the next hour, this peaceful terminal would become the center of a global story. Officer Mark Jensen adjusted the badge on his uniform as he led his elite K9 unit along the polished floors of Gate 12. 21 German shepherds walked in flawless formation beside their handlers, silent, focused, disciplined. This was no ordinary patrol. The unit was conducting a routine security sweep ahead of a high-profile arrival, the kind that demanded absolute precision. Mark took pride in this team. These dogs were the top detection K9s in the country, each one trained with a specific specialty: explosives, narcotics, electronic interference, crowd threat detection. Individually, they were unmatched. Together, they formed a wall of instinct and loyalty stronger than any technology. Rex, Mark's lead dog, moved slightly ahead of the group, his sharp amber eyes scanning faces and luggage with unbroken concentration. Passengers often paused to admire the unit. Some snapped photos, others waved shyly at the dogs. Mark allowed it. People needed symbols of safety, especially in a world where danger often hid in plain sight. His radio crackled. "Unit 7, maintain sweep at Gate 12. VIP movement scheduled in 30. Mark acknowledged the message tone steady. He had done this hundreds of times. But today, something felt different. He glanced down just in time to notice Rex's ears twitch. The dog's gaze drifted toward a quiet corner near the waiting area. Nothing seemed unusual, just a janitor mopping the floor, a couple reviewing tickets, a small family near the window. Mark brushed it off, assuming it was a stray scent. But Rex rarely misread his instincts. Mark gave a low whistle. Rex straightened again, alert and obedient. The unit continued forward, admired by onlookers, who had no idea that before this day ended, these 14 dogs would defy every command break formation and do the unthinkable. They would surround a little girl, and in doing so, save her life. The morning rush carried on smoothly, as if nothing unusual lingered beneath the polished floors and sunlit windows. Travelers sipped coffee, children tugged at their parents' hands, and boarding announcements echoed like background music. But near Gate 12, something small, so small it was almost invisible, stood quietly apart from the flow of movement. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 4. She stood beside a luggage cart alone, perfectly still, as if rooted to the spot. She didn't cry. She didn't call for help. She simply stared straight ahead, her tiny fingers gripping a worn-out stuffed bear whose fur was faded from love and time. She held it so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. Officer Mark Jensen noticed her almost by accident. His unit had just completed the sweep of the boarding area when a glimpse of soft pink caught his eye. The girl's small jacket glowed faintly under the sunlight, pouring through the glass walls, making her presence stand out in a way that tugged at him. He slowed. "Anyone see her come in?" he murmured to the nearest officer. The man shook his head. No parents in sight. No guardian. A faint frown creased Mark's brow. Behind him, Rex suddenly changed pace. The lead shepherd's ears pricked forward, his muscles tightening with an alertness Mark recognized immediately. Rex wasn't acting curious, he was sensing something. Something subtle. Something human eyes couldn't see. One by one, the other dogs mirrored him. Noses lifted, chests expanded. Bodies angled toward the girl as though an invisible thread pulled them into alignment. Passengers began to notice. "Is she lost someone?" whispered. "Oh, look, the dogs like her," another murmured, lifting a phone to record. But the air didn't feel heartwarming. It felt heavy like a storm gathering. Mark stepped forward, slowly lowering his voice. "Hey there, sweetheart." "Are you lost?" The girl didn't answer. She hugged her bear tighter and looked up at him with wide blue eyes, eyes that seemed distant, cloudy, almost as if she were somewhere far away. "Do you know where your mom or dad is?" Mark tried again. Nothing. Only silence, and the soft click of the bear's button eye as her trembling fingers rubbed against it. Behind him, a low growl rippled through the dogs. Rex, then another, and another. Mark turned, tension sliding into his bones. 14 trained K9s didn't growl without reason. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And in that quiet patch of sunlight, the calm of the airport began to crack open, one heartbeat at a time. The silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then everything erupted at once. Rex's low growl suddenly sharpened into a powerful echoing bark that cracked through the terminal like a lightning strike. In the same instant, all 14 police dogs reacted as if connected by a single pulse. Their bodies pivoted in perfect unison, eyes snapping toward the little girl. The shift was so synchronized, so deliberate, that passengers around them froze mid-step. A mother grabbed her son's hand. A man dropped his coffee. Several phones shot into the air recording. The dogs moved with calculated precision, no hesitation, no wasted motion. They closed in around the child, forming a perfect circle, each shepherd standing shoulder to shoulder. Their tails stiffened, their chests expanded, and their heads lowered slightly, creating a wall of fur and muscle around the tiny girl. "Hold positions," Mark shouted, but the command dissolved into the chaos. They didn't obey. But they also didn't attack, not even close. Their bodies were tense. Yes, but the tension was outward, not inward. They weren't restraining the girl. They were shielding her, turning their focus toward some unseen threat. A wave of fear rippled through the terminal. "What's happening?" someone whispered. "Is she dangerous? Are they protecting her from something?" Even the officers hesitated, hands drifting toward holsters, waiting for Mark's signal. Mark knew his dogs better than anyone alive. This wasn't aggression. This was instinct screaming. He stepped closer, carefully, heart pounding. Rex stood closest to the girl, positioned in front of her, like a trained guardian. His nose twitched, as he sniffed the air around her muscles, trembling with restrained urgency. The girl didn't scream. She didn't run. She only stared at the circle of dogs with wide, confused eyes, clutching her stuffed bear, as if it were the only familiar thing left in the world. Sunlight streamed across the polished floor, catching the sheen of the dogs' coats, creating a surreal and haunting image. 14 powerful K9s, forming a living shield around a child who seemed too stunned to move. Mark swallowed hard. Easy. Let them work, he said quietly to the other officers. Rex barked once short, sharp commanding. The circle tightened. The crowd gasped, and Mark felt it in his bones. Whatever was happening, the dogs had seen it coming long before any human could. Something near the child had triggered them. Something hidden. Something dangerous. And this was only the beginning. The moment Rex lunged forward, the world shattered into chaos. Passengers screamed, scattering like startled birds. Suitcases toppled across the glossy floor. Hot coffee splashed against shoes. Chairs screeched as people stumbled back, desperate to escape whatever danger the dogs had sensed. The barking intensified, deep, commanding, relentless. 14 powerful voices echoing off the high glass walls, vibrating through the entire terminal. "Everyone stay back," Mark shouted, raising both hands. But his warning barely reached anyone. Fear had already drowned the room. Some believed the dogs were attacking. Others thought an explosive had been found. Panic spread faster than sound. In the center of the storm, the little girl stood frozen tears, trembling in her lashes. She clutched her stuffed bear so tightly, the seams stretched, but she couldn't make herself move. Her tiny chest rose and fell in fast, shallow breaths. Rex positioned himself directly between her and the crowd, his body becoming a shield. The other dogs snapped into formation behind him, forming a tighter ring, this time facing outward. Their eyes scanned the terminal, searching, calculating, ready to confront whatever threat lurked unseen. Mark's pulse spiked. His dogs had never misjudged danger, not once. "Rex," he called, trying to steady his voice. "What do you smell?" "Boy." Rex didn't look at him. Instead, he inched closer to the girl's stuffed bear nose, twitching rapidly, ears pinned forward. A guttural rumble vibrated in his chest, a sound Mark had only heard when the dog detected something truly dangerous. A warning. A serious one. "Get bomb squad on standby," Mark ordered into his radio voice, low but urgent. "Lockdown gate 12, now." Officers scrambled to seal exits. Alarm lights began to flash overhead, casting the terminal in a pulsing red glow. Emergency shutters rattled as they descended partway. Passengers were herded toward distant exits, their frightened voices rising in a tangled storm. Mark crouched near the girl, forcing calm into his tone, despite the pounding in his chest. "Sweetheart, you're doing great. You're safe, okay? We're here to help." Her lips shook. "They're not mad," she whispered. "They're scared." The simplicity of her words made Mark's stomach twist. Rex barked sharply again, once loud enough to silence every remaining whisper. His eyes locked on the bear, the fur on his spine rising. Whatever had triggered them, whatever danger lurked, it was coming from inside that toy. And the calm morning was gone forever. Red emergency lights pulsed across the terminal painting, everything in flashes of crimson, as the chaos slowly thinned. Passengers had been pushed far back. Officers formed a perimeter, but the barking hadn't stopped. Not even for a second. Rex stood rigid nose, hovering just inches from the stuffed bear, sniffing sharply, as if sorting through layers of invisible signals. Mark knelt beside him, feeling the tension vibrating in the dog's muscles, tight as coiled steel. "Rex," he whispered, "what are you picking up?" The shepherd didn't blink. He sniffed the bear again, then suddenly shifted nose, gliding along the little girl's sleeve, then the front of her jacket, then the air around her. His movement was careful, controlled, almost surgical. Behind him, the rest of the K9 unit responded in perfect harmony. Noses lifted, bodies angled toward the girl. Low growls rolled through the circle like a warning shared through instinct rather than sound. Officer Diaz crouched next to his own dog eyes narrowing. Mark. It's not explosive residue. If it were, the sensors would have lit up. Mark shook his head. This isn't the way they react to chemicals. Look at their posture. They're torn between protecting and warning. The girl hugged herself, trembling. He's scared, she whispered. Mark's breath caught. Who's scared, sweetheart? She pointed a small finger at Rex. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Dogs didn't get scared, not like this. They sensed danger before it became visible. Suddenly, one of the shepherds snapped its head toward a row of seats near the window. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, half the unit was facing the same direction, growls rising like an approaching storm. Mark turned sharply. A stroller abandoned near the glass, a half-finished cup of coffee, a child's shoe lying on its side. Nothing dangerous, at least to human eyes. Search, Mark commanded. The dogs broke formation instantly. 2 rushed toward the stroller. Others circled the seats, noses dragging along fabric and floor tiles, movements sharp and urgent. Then Rex growled, Diplo unmistakable. He wasn't looking at the seats, he was looking at the girl again. It's not the area, Mark muttered. It's on her. Diaz's face hardened. Contaminant residue. A device, maybe Mark said, scanning the room with rising dread. But why would a child be carrying it? Rex barked again, nose pressed closer to the girl's jacket. Whatever scent he had locked onto, whatever danger clung to her clothes, it wasn't coming toward them. It was already here. The air inside Gate 12 felt heavy enough to crush a breath. Red alarm lights flashed in rhythmic pulses across the ceiling, and the once busy terminal now stood nearly empty, cleared except for officers, handlers, and 14 tense German shepherds who refused to relax. Rex's body was stiff, every muscle braced. His gaze was glued to the stuffed bear clutched in the little girl's trembling hands. Mark crouched in front of her voice, calm but urgent. "Sweetheart," he murmured gently, "I need you to hand me your toy. I promise I'll give it right back." The girl hesitated. Her lower lip trembled as she hugged the bear tighter, the matted fur pressed to her cheek like a lifeline. "It's my friend," she whispered. "Daddy gave it to me." The words hit Mark like a gut punch. "I know," he said softly, forcing a reassuring smile. "And we just want to make sure your friend is safe, too." "Okay." After a long, shaky pause, the child slowly extended the bear. Mark took it carefully, his gloved fingers brushing the worn fabric. The toy felt heavier than it should, slightly unbalanced, oddly rigid beneath the stuffing. When he pressed his thumb along the torso, something inside shifted with a faint metallic click. A cold prickle crept up the back of his neck. "Diaz," he said quietly. "Scanner." Officer Diaz moved quickly, pulling out a compact handheld detector from the equipment kit. He powered it on, and a soft electronic hum filled the air. Mark placed the bear on the floor. Diaz hovered the scanner over the toy. Beep. A sharp, high-frequency tone cut through the silence. Every officer froze. Rex growled, stepping back, fur bristling down his spine. The other dogs erupted into synchronized barks, forming a loose barrier around the child again, as if ready to strike at whatever danger the scanner had just revealed. "What is it?" Mark demanded, throat tightening. Diaz stared at the device's screen, disbelief widening his eyes. Metal signature. Inside the torso. Mark felt a wave of cold wash through him. "Could be wiring," Diaz added. "This isn't normal toy construction." The scanner beeped again, louder. Diaz's hands trembled. "Sir, this isn't a modification by a toy repair shop." His voice cracked. "There's circuitry in here. Rex barked fiercely at the bear, as if confirming the revelation. Mark turned to the girl, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, do you know what's inside this?" She shook her head violently, tears welling. "It's just a bear," she insisted, voice cracking. The scanner beeped once more, rapid and urgent. Diaz lifted his head. "Sir, there are wires. There's a power source. This is not a toy." The temperature in Mark's body seemed to drop. "Everyone step back," he ordered. Handlers pulled the dogs to formation. Officers carefully retreated. Dogs tightened their positions. The bomb squad was already en route, but 4 minutes felt like a lifetime. Mark placed the bear gently on the floor and stepped away. Rex stayed between the toy and the child, his body trembling with instinctive warning. The radio crackled. "EOD 2 minutes out." Mark exhaled, but couldn't shake the dread twisting in his stomach. Then a small, choked voice broke the silence. "I told him not to put it in there." Mark froze. He knelt again, eyes level with the trembling girl, told who he asked softly. She sniffled, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "The man at the airport. He said Daddy wanted it fixed." A cold chill sliced down Mark's spine. "What man?" he pressed gently. "The man who took me from the bathroom," she whispered. Before Mark could react, Lily. A woman's desperate scream shattered the air. Everyone turned as a frantic mother sprinted past security, hair disheveled, face streaked with tears. "That's my daughter. Please let me through." Officers grabbed her arms, trying to restrain her. "Ma'am, stand back. This is a restricted area. She's only 4. The mother sobbed, fighting them. "Someone took her from the restroom. Please let me get to her." Mark raised a hand. "Let her through." The woman rushed to the girl, collapsing beside her. "Lily, oh my God. Lily, are you hurt? Did they touch you? Baby, look at me." The girl buried her face into her mother's chest, sobbing for the first time that morning. Rex studied them closely, his ears pinned forward, his tail stiffened. Mark held his breath. Then Rex's posture softened. He stepped toward the woman, not with suspicion, but with recognition of innocence. Mark exhaled. She's telling the truth. The mother, still trembling, looked up at him. "Officer, what's happening? What did they do to her?" "Ma'am," Mark said gently, "we found something hidden inside your daughter's toy. Do you know anything about this bear?" The woman's face drained of all color. That's her favorite," she whispered. "Her father gave it to her before." She stopped. Before what Mark asked carefully. Her lips quivered. Before he disappeared. Silence fell. Mark's brow furrowed. Disappeared wanted choking back a sob. He was an engineer, a top one. He worked on a classified communication system for the military. 3 months ago he discovered something he wasn't supposed to see. A breach. He tried to report it, but before he could... Her voice broke. He vanished. They called it an accident. I didn't believe them. Mark felt the pieces clicking together, slow, terrifying, inevitable. After he disappeared, she continued shakily. Strange men started following us. Unmarked cars. Anonymous calls. I changed cities twice, but they kept finding us. She clutched Lily tighter. And today, at the airport, a man offered to fix her bear. Said the stitching was coming loose. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of her regret. I thought he was being kind. Mark swallowed hard. They used your daughter as a carrier. As bait. The mother covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Mark felt the full gravity of it settling like concrete inside his chest. These men weren't amateurs. This wasn't theft. This wasn't ransom. This was espionage. And the innocent little girl at the center of it had no idea she had been turned into the perfect disguise. Before Mark could say another word, Rex growled again. Deep. Low. Final. Mark's blood ran cold. The danger wasn't behind them. It was getting closer. The bomb squad arrived within minutes, moving with the precision of surgeons. The bear was placed on an isolated inspection table beneath a floodlight, its seams carefully cut open to expose the hidden mechanism inside. Officers gathered around, holding their breaths, as the lead technician lifted the tiny metallic core, a device no bigger than a coin, yet humming faintly with purpose. "It's not an explosive," the technician muttered, brows furrowing. Mark leaned closer. "Then what is it?" "It's transmitting," the man replied, confusion twisting into dread. "Or it was transmitting before we shut it down." Mark felt his heartbeat falter. Transmitting, what the technician tapped a few buttons on his portable reader, the screen filling with scrolling data. Coordinates, signal bursts, location packets. This is a high-grade tracker, military grade. Someone was monitoring this little girl's position in real time. Emily gasped, hugging Lily, as though trying to shield her from the truth. "They found us again. Didn't they?" Mark turned toward her, expression tightening. "Who's they?" Ma'am, tears shimmered in her eyes. "The people who took my husband." The room fell silent. She took a shaky breath. "Daniel, my husband wasn't just an engineer. He was the lead developer for a new encrypted communication chip, a system meant to protect top-secret transmissions. 3 months ago, he uncovered unauthorized access. Someone was siphoning encrypted data." Mark's breath caught. "A breach." "Yes," she whispered. "He tried to warn his superiors, but before he could go public, he vanished. They called it an accident. But I knew better. And after that, cars followed me. Phones rang at night with no one on the line." She trembled. "I thought I was paranoid. I thought maybe grief was making me imagine things." Mark shook his head. "You weren't imagining anything." She wiped her eyes. "The man at the airport, the one who fixed Lily's bear, he told her Daddy wanted it repaired. That's how he took her. That's how he planted this." Mark stared at the exposed circuitry, intricate, compact, far beyond consumer tech. They turned the child into a tracking beacon, a mobile spy node, and none of them would have known if Rex and the K-9 unit hadn't reacted. The technician's radio beeped. "Sir," he said, looking up, "we traced the signal's destination. The device was actively broadcasting to a receiver somewhere nearby before we disabled it." Mark stiffened. "Nearby? How close?" "Close enough to still be within visual range," the technician replied. Just then, Rex snapped his head toward the massive glass wall. His growl deepened, vibrating across the room like rolling thunder. Mark followed the dog's line of sight. Outside, just beyond the security fence, a black van sat idling. Dark windows, engine running. Waiting. Diaz lifted his radio. "We've got movement outside, possible suspects." Mark's voice dropped to a razor's edge. "Get eyes on that vehicle. Now." Rex froze so suddenly that even the other dogs seemed to sense the shift before the humans did. His ears shot forward, his body stiffening like a drawn bowstring. Then, with no warning at all, he erupted into a fierce, urgent bark that ricocheted through the terminal. Mark whipped around. "Rex, what is it, boy?" But he already knew it wasn't nothing. Rex didn't bark like this unless the threat was real and close. One by one, the other dogs fell into alignment, their bodies angling toward the glass wall overlooking the tarmac. 14 heads, 14 sets of sharpened instincts, all pointing in the same direction. Toward the black van. Diaz followed their gaze and swore under his breath. "You've got to be kidding me. That thing's still out there." Mark grabbed his radio instantly. "Control, this is Jensen. We have an unmarked vehicle at the perimeter fence. Engine running. No visible plates. Possible connection to the tracker device. Requesting tactical units ASAP." Static cracked for a second. Then command replied. "Units dispatched. ETA 2 minutes." Rex barked again, lunging toward the window so hard that Mark had to tighten his grip on the leash. It wasn't aggression. It was urgency. the kind of instinctive alarm that sent adrenaline slicing through Mark's veins. Emily clutched Lily closer. "What's happening?" she cried. Mark didn't sugarcoat it. "We think the people who planted that device are still here." As if on cue, the van's headlights flicked on. The engine roared. Then the vehicle lurched forward, speeding toward the service road, with tires screeching across the asphalt. "Go, go!" Mark barked into the radio. All available units intercept that vehicle. Outside officers sprinted toward their cars. Sirens burst to life, echoing across the tarmac. A helicopter overhead rotated its floodlights, sharply illuminating the fleeing van. Inside the terminal, the dogs went wild, barking in a thunderous chorus that made the windows vibrate. Their instincts were locked on the exact direction of the threat, as if every bark was pointing the officers toward their target. Mark watched through the glass as the van swerved dangerously close to the outer fence. Two silhouettes could be seen inside, one leaning forward, one glancing back toward the terminal. Rex snarled, teeth bared, as if he recognized the scent even through the glass. Then the van shot past the gate and disappeared into the fog, and Mark knew this chase was far from over. Outside, the tarmac had transformed into a high-stakes battleground. The black van tore down the perimeter road, swerving dangerously as squad cars closed in from multiple angles. Sirens wailed through the air, rising and falling like alarms in a war zone. Overhead, helicopter rotors thundered, sweeping bright searchlights across the wet asphalt. Inside the lead cruiser, Diaz's voice boomed through the radio. "Unit 7 in pursuit." Suspects fleeing eastbound speed over 70. Mark watched from the terminal window, knuckles white around Rex's leash. The German shepherd paced relentlessly, barking each time the van jerked or swerved, as if guiding the chase from a distance. The van suddenly veered left, the passenger leaning halfway out the window. "What is he?" Diaz started to say. Then a metallic object flew from the suspect's hand, clattering across the service road. Sparks erupted. A burst of crackling light detonated beneath the nearest police cruiser's tires, forcing the vehicle to swerve violently off the road. "Officer down, cruiser disabled," someone shouted over the radio. The van accelerated again, fishtailing as it pushed deeper toward the restricted zone. "Spike strips ready," another unit responded. Two police vehicles raced ahead, braking sharply as officers jumped out and dragged heavy spike strips across the asphalt. The van had no escape route, only seconds left before impact. Mark held his breath. The van hit the spikes at full speed. A deafening pop blasted through the air as all four tires blew simultaneously. The vehicle skidded, tilted, and spun in a chaotic arc before slamming sideways into the perimeter fence with a screech of metal. Officers swarmed the wreck. "Driver hands where we can see them. Step out of the vehicle now." The driver bolted, stumbling across the road in a desperate attempt to flee, but he didn't get far. A K9 unit. Thor, one of Mark's strongest dogs, lunged forward with perfect control, tackling the man to the ground. The suspect screamed, struggling uselessly, as Thor held him pinned with a firm, trained bite. The passenger, trembling and pale, raised both hands as tactical officers surrounded him. "Suspects in custody." Diaz's voice rang through the comms. "Repeat, both suspects." Apprehended, Mark exhaled sharply, tension finally loosening in his shoulders. Rex, still alert beside him, let out a breathy whine, but didn't take his eyes off the crash site even now, watching as if to ensure the threat stayed neutralized. Within minutes, bomb techs and intelligence officers gathered around the wrecked van. Laptops, burners, passports, hard drives, all seized. An officer lifted a sealed evidence bag. "Sir, you'll want to see this." Inside were surveillance photos of Emily, of Lily, of Daniel Parker taken in multiple countries spanning months, coordinates, timestamps, notes. Mark stared in stunned silence. "This wasn't an isolated attack," he murmured. "This was global." Rex nudged his leg, gently grounding him. Mark placed a hand on the dog's head. "You did good, partner," he whispered. And he meant every word. The chaos outside gradually softened, replaced by the cold hum of engines idling and distant radio chatter. Officers moved with methodical precision around the crashed van, marking evidence, photographing angles, and securing every inch of the scene. The adrenaline was slowly draining, leaving behind the sharp aftertaste of what could have gone terribly wrong. Inside the terminal, Mark stood at the window, watching the flashing lights flicker across the rain-damp tarmac. Rex sat pressed against his leg chest, rising and falling in deep, steady breaths. Though the danger had passed, the dog's eyes stayed fixed on the wrecked vehicle, as if unwilling to look away until the last threat had been sealed away. Diaz jogged back inside, holding a tablet and an evidence folder. "Mark," he called quietly, waving him over. "You need to see this." They stepped into a corner where officers had set up a temporary command station. On a metal table lay several items pulled from the van: encrypted drives, burner phones, multiple passports with different identities, a folded map covered in numbers, and a file filled with photos. Dozens of photos. Emily, Lily, Daniel Parker. Captured from airports, streets, parking garages, even grocery stores. Taken from different angles, different countries, different months. Every photo was labeled with coordinates, dates, and coded notes. Mark felt his stomach clench. "They've been tracking this family for almost a year," Diaz muttered, shaking his head. "Before Daniel disappeared. And long after." Another officer handed Mark a printed page pulled from the encrypted laptop. It listed frequencies, network access, points, timestamps, and a trace route. Mark exhaled slowly. They weren't just following them. They were using Lily's proximity to sensitive sites, military bases, government buildings, research labs. Diaz rubbed his temples. They turned the kid into a walking surveillance tool, without her or her mother ever knowing. A tight knot formed in Mark's chest, a mixture of anger and sorrow. All because a man tried to report the truth. All because he loved his family enough to give his daughter a simple toy, a toy that someone else weaponized. Rex nudged Mark's hand, gently sensing the weight in his partner's silence. Mark looked down. Rex's eyes were soft, deep brown, and full of understanding, as if he knew exactly how much this discovery hurt. "You felt this from the start, didn't you?" Mark whispered. Rex's ears tilted forward, tail giving a slow, steady wag. An officer approached with another update. "Tech team confirms it. The transmitter wasn't just tracking Lily. It was piggybacking off her movements to breach secure networks. If your dogs hadn't reacted when they did..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Mark swallowed hard. The airport could have become the epicenter of a national catastrophe, and none of them would have seen it coming. Rex pressed closer, resting his head gently against Mark's knee, a silent reassurance, a reminder of why the dogs were there, not just tools, but partners, guardians. Mark placed a hand on the shepherd's back, feeling his steady heartbeat beneath the fur. "You saved them," he murmured. "All of them." For a long moment, man and dog stood in quiet understanding while the chaos slowly settled around them. Outside, officers carted evidence away. Inside, the truth of what the dogs had prevented hung heavy in the air. And Mark knew this day would change everything. As the last emergency vehicles rolled away from the tarmac, the tension inside the terminal finally began to dissolve. The red lights dimmed. The alarms faded. Officers lowered their weapons, exchanging exhausted looks of relief. For the first time since the chaos erupted, the airport felt quiet. Emily sat on the polished floor, back against a support pillar, holding Lily tightly in her arms. The little girl clung to her mother like she was afraid the world might pull her away again. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her breath still shaky, but at least finally she was safe. Rex approached them slowly, his movements soft and deliberate. No growling now. No rigid posture. Just calm, gentle steps as he lowered his head near Lily, sniffing lightly, as if to reassure himself she was truly unharmed. Lily blinked up at him, fear melting into surprise. Then she did something no one expected. She giggled, a small, fragile sound, like the first beam of sunlight after a storm. The little girl reached out her tiny hands and wrapped them around Rex's neck, burying her face in his thick fur. Rex stayed absolutely still, letting her hold him, his tail giving the tiniest wag. One by one, the other dogs mirrored his calm, lowering themselves to the floor around her. 14 German shepherds, all heroes in their own right, formed a quiet circle, not of protection this time, but of comfort. A murmur rippled through the terminal, then applause. Soft at first, then louder and louder. Passengers, airport staff officers, everyone long since cleared to the edges of the hall, now stood watching with awe. Some recorded the moment, others wiped tears, but all of them felt the same thing: relief, gratitude, and admiration. Emily brushed a tear from her cheek as she looked at Mark. "You and your dogs. You saved us," she whispered. Mark shook his head gently. "No, ma'am." He did. He nodded toward Rex, who now rested his head in Lily's lap, as if standing guard over her heart. Lily lifted her face and whispered into Rex's fur. "Good boy." The shepherd closed his eyes, accepting the words like a medal placed directly onto his soul. For the first time since the morning began, the terminal felt warm, again, lit not by alarms or panic, but by the simple, undeniable truth. These dogs were more than protectors. They were family. They were hope. They were heroes. By the time the last cruiser pulled away from the runway, a heavy calm settled over the airport. The chaos, the sirens, the shouting, all of it faded into a distant hum like a memory struggling to loosen its grip. The terminal lights glowed softly again, reflecting off the windows where rain had begun to slide in thin, quiet streams. Mark stood near the giant glass wall, staring out at the tarmac, washed in gray morning light. His reflection stared back at him, tired, shaken, but profoundly aware of how close they'd come to disaster. Beside him, Rex lay stretched out on the cool tile floor, head resting on his paws. He wasn't tense anymore. His breaths were slow, steady. But his eyes remained open, watching everything with that same depth of instinct that had changed the fate of an entire airport. Mark sank onto the bench behind him, resting a hand on Rex's back. "You knew before any of us," he murmured, voice barely above a breath. Rex flicked an ear, acknowledging the words without moving. Mark let the truth wash over him. If Rex hadn't reacted when he did, if the dogs hadn't broken formation, if they had hesitated for even a moment, he didn't want to imagine the outcome. Across the hall, he saw Emily holding Lily, both wrapped in a blanket offered by paramedics. The little girl waved when she spotted Rex, and the shepherd's tail thumped gently against the floor in response. Diaz walked up quietly, leaning on the railing. "These dogs," he said softly. "They see the world in ways we never will," Mark nodded. "Yeah, and sometimes they remind us of things we forget, like what he looked down at Rex, who had finally closed his eyes, trusting that for now, the danger was gone. That even in the worst moments, Mark said, there are still instincts out there fighting for us, protecting us, even when we don't see the threat." Diaz exhaled, letting the weight of the day settle. "Think they know they saved hundreds of lives today?" Mark smiled faintly. "They don't need to know. That's what makes them heroes." Outside, the first flight of the morning rose into the air, cutting through the clouds, ordinary, peaceful, unaware of how much had been preserved. And inside the quiet terminal, Rex slept, a guardian at rest. By the next morning, the airport had returned to its usual rhythm, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, the scent of fresh coffee drifting through the air. But beneath the surface, nothing was the same. The world had already changed overnight, because the story had escaped the walls of the terminal. It had spread like wildfire. Passengers who had filmed the moment 14 German shepherds formed a perfect protective circle around a terrified little girl, began uploading their footage to social media. Within hours, millions of views poured in. Headlines exploded across news sites, 14 tales of courage. Police dogs sense danger before humans do. The airport miracle. Talk shows replayed the scene in slow motion. Analysts attempted to explain canine intuition. Parents around the world hugged their children a little closer. Artists and school kids began drawing pictures of Rex and the other K9s wearing heroic capes or tiny police badges. At the precinct, Mark scrolled through the flood of coverage on a small monitor. Clips of the dogs went viral, Rex barking the warning, Thor taking down the suspect, the circle closing around Lily. Officers gathered behind him, shaking their heads in disbelief. "You realize," Diaz said with a crooked grin, "your whole team is basically famous now, trending everywhere." Mark gave a quiet laugh. "They don't care about fame." He looked down at Rex, who lay by his feet lazily chewing a rubber toy someone from the staff had gifted him. The shepherd looked content, blissfully unaware that millions of people were calling him a hero. "All he cares about," Mark said softly, "is that the girl is safe." Later that afternoon, Emily sent a video from the hospital, Lily sitting up in bed, hair messy but smiling shyly at the camera. "She keeps asking about her dogs," Emily said in the clip, "especially the one who looked at her like he already knew her heart." Mark watched it twice, then forwarded it to the team. No captions, no commentary, just the pure, simple gratitude captured in a child's smile. By evening, news vans crowded outside the K9 facility. Offers for interviews, documentaries, and special appearances flooded in. But Mark refused them all. "Let the story speak for itself," he said. The world had already seen the truth. Courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it walked quietly on four paws. 2 weeks later, the world was still buzzing about the airport miracle, but Mark barely noticed the headlines anymore. What stayed with him wasn't the fame, the interviews, or the praise. It was the memory of a tiny girl clutching a stuffed bear, surrounded by 14 loyal dogs who had refused to let danger touch her. That morning, Mark and Rex walked down the quiet hospital hallway. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic. Nurses moved softly between rooms. Everything felt calm, so different from the chaos of that day. When Mark reached Lily's door, he knocked gently. Inside, Lily sat upright in her bed, a thin blanket draped over her lap. Her eyes brightened instantly the moment she saw the familiar brown and black shepherd. "Rex," she squealed, stretching out her arms. "You came back." Rex's tail wagged in wide, sweeping arcs as he padded toward her bedside. He rested his head carefully on the edge of the mattress, as if he understood how fragile she still was. Lily giggled and ran her fingers through his fur, the simple joy radiating from her like sunlight. Emily smiled from the chair beside the bed, tears glistening, but peaceful this time. "He remembered me," Mommy, Lily whispered. "Of course he did," Emily said softly. "Heroes never forget the ones they save." Mark leaned against the doorframe, watching the exchange with a tightness in his throat. He had seen bravery before, on duty, in crisis, in the darkest corners of the world. But this was the kind of courage that softened something inside him. Emily stood and approached him, pressing a small, folded piece of paper into his hand. "Lily wanted to give this to you," she said. Mark unfolded it carefully. Written in uneven, childlike handwriting were 6 simple words. "Tell the dog he's my angel." For a moment, Mark couldn't speak. He looked over at Rex, who had closed his eyes as Lily hugged him, as if accepting the title with quiet dignity. Mark swallowed the lump in his throat and smiled. "Come on, partner," he whispered. "Another mission complete." As they stepped out of the room, sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, warm and gentle like a promise. And the world was reminded once more. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear badges. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with us through this emotional story. Police dogs like Rex aren't just heroes for one day. They are a reminder that there are silent guardians watching over us every single moment. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next journeys we tell. And you know what? Every share helps spread a little more kindness, courage, and hope to people around the world. Let me know in the comments below. Which moment moved you the most? I truly enjoy reading your thoughts and feelings. Thank you for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next story, where silent heroes continue to walk beside us on 4 legs.